Hello and welcome to another video from Life Gun Cigar. So today we have the Springfield XD. This is a 9mm version. We're going to do a quick field strip and then we're going to do a detailed strip of the slide. So first things first, let's make sure that it's safe so there's no magazine in it. Double check the chamber. Physically verify. I said no thing in the chamber. And while it's back, we can now flip this lever up. So that's the lever we're going to flip up. It's going to slide in this groove right here. At that point, we can let the slide go forward. Pull the trigger. Again, that's why I make it sure it's safe. And now the slide can be pulled off of the gun. So let's put that aside. Take the captured spring and guide rod, put that aside, and then we can lift up on the barrel and pull that out. So that's what you need to do for a field strip. However, this is going to be where we go through a detailed strip of the slide itself. So, tools you're going to need, or tools that I at least use. A bench block. This is a universal one from Wheeler. I use a pair of pliers, just a basic needle nose, and you're going to need some punches. So I use a 1/16, which is 1.5 millimeters. I also use for the large punch, a 1/8, and for my medium punch, this one is a 3/32. These two are roll pin punches. This one's not. They don't need to be roll pin punches. I have them, so I use them. So you're also going to need a hammer, and I use a very lightweight one. I like to make sure I can feel how far things are going or not. So now that we have our tools, let's get started. Now, take your large pin or pin punch, and you're going to slide it into this hole right here. Make sure you can see that. Now the inner part will actually move. This part will not, at least not yet. So we're going to push in, and while we're pushing in, we're going to slide that cover down a bit. And at that point, you can take your pin punch out and move it aside, and this is still captured, but barely. So this is where you got to be careful. We're going to place our one thumb. You're not going to be able to see what I'm doing, and you'll see why in a second. Place our one thumb over most of that, and with the other hand, pull the slide, the rear of the slide stop off. And what you're going to hear is a snap. That was the snap. So now we have the slide cover off. Now what I have is my thumb keeping pressure on the springs. This is why you need your thumb there, because they're under a pretty good amount of pressure. That's where they are relaxed. And that's a good 1.5 inches out. So if you don't have your thumb there, these will summarily shoot off and God knows where. So by holding that in, you're going to make your life a lot easier. You don't want to lose parts. So you can then take out the spring, the striker pin, and the spring for that, and then the polymer guide rod is what I call that. Alright, and we're going to put that aside. Okay, so now we have that part out. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the firing pin and spring out, but you have to take this roll pin out, and that goes through the top here and through to the bottom. Now, it is a little bit bigger on the top, the hole for the roll pin, than the bottom. So you want to drive it from the bottom out. Right, so we're going to take my bench, and what I'm going to use here is my medium thickness, which is the 3/32 pin. It is a roll pin punch, but doesn't have to be. And we're going to drive that pin out. Sorry for all the noise, but it has to be done. So now that we have the pin out, that's actually the pin punch, we can take that out, and here we have our roll pin. So we're going to put that aside. Now we can take out the firing pin itself. That's the firing pin. This is the part that strikes the cartridge and the primer. And this is where this part feeds in to it. There's also a spring inside here. So I'm going to rotate this down, and that spring will come out. I had to hit it a little bit, but yours may be stuck a little more or a little less. Alright, so we're going to put that aside. That's the firing pin spring, and that's what keeps it kept back. So now we have the firing pin out, all the firing pin and striker accoutrements. Now if you want to go further and take the live round elevator out, you're going to take one more pin out. It's this one right here. This is just a basic pin. It's not a roll pin, and I cannot tell any difference between left and right, but I always do it the same way. So I'm going to go from the left side of the gun, if it's facing this way, with the end of the barrel forward. I'm going to go from the left side out to the right. And to do this, I'm going to use my smallest one. I'm going to use my 1/16. And we're making a little noise. And right now we have it started. It's not all the way out though. And I find that using the pliers to assist it a little bit will make your life a little easier. Now, take it from me, I've done this before. I'm going to put that pin aside. Do not try to drive this all the way through, because if you do so, you will scratch the coating. Which I'm not sure if it's melanite or such, but you will scratch around there. I don't know if you can see, there's a little tiny nick on it. So don't bother with that, and just use a pair of pliers and pull it out. You won't damage this pin unless you're really, really crazy with it. So what fell out is the loaded round chamber indicator and the spring that goes inside there. And where they go is right in here. So the spring goes in the back part, and the loaded chamber indicator goes in there also, like that. Okay, put that aside. And now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take out one safety. So there's a pin in here that's a little, it's almost kind of purplish looking. See if I can give you a close up. There we go. So we're going to try to remove this pin that's in there. And what I find works well for me is our pliers. And what we're going to do is there's a little bit of a notch in the back of that. So what I use is the tip of my pliers, and I give it a little bit of pull, and then that's all you really need, and that'll get it moving. Alright, so probably can't tell as easily, but that's now, let me get a little more light. It's now up a little bit. It's not exactly smooth and flush. So now that can be pulled out. Alright, so now you can see it coming out. And when you do that, be careful and hold this in, because this is what's holding that in. So we're going to pull this out while we keep our thumb on that. And that elevator can then come free. And the screw, and the spring, sorry, that's in there can now drop out. There we go. Alright, so that's where it goes. I don't know if you can see that little dimple in there. That's where that goes. And that slides into the notch or dimple in the elevator, that's what I call it. And this little groove here, where my fingernail is, that's the groove that this slides into. So that holds this in. So this can move up and down to keep the firing pin from going forward, and that's what holds everything together for that. Now the only part left then in the slide, with the exception of the sights, which you don't need to take out to clean it, is the extractor. Now the extractor, which is this part right here, can be taken out. It's held in by friction right here, and it goes all the way across. So you can remove that. However, it's not easy, nor do I suggest doing it. And here is why. If you attempt to remove this, and you're going to have to put pressure downward on the extractor itself to try to get it out. Either you're going to have to pry up or push out, or some way try to grab it with a pair of pliers and try to tank it out. Now here's the issue. If you attempt to do so, and for some reason while you're doing that you bend it, it will drop further down. I've actually taken this out once before. It will drop down further than what you may like. Now I was able to get mine in there and doing well, but what you probably can't see is there's a little bit of a gap. I'll try to get a little more light on it. A little bit of a gap in my extractor. And the top of the slide, or the bottom of the slide. I don't know if you can see that there now. But you don't want any split there. You don't want any difference in that part. You don't want that, you want that to look like one piece basically. You don't want a seam right there. Alright, so taking this out is ill-advised in my opinion. It can be done. It's not necessary. You can clean underneath here with a Q-tip and a dental pick if you desire, and do the same job as removing it entirely. If of course it's bent or messed up and you have to remove it, then you can do so, but I do not suggest doing such. So with that warning said, let's go ahead and put this back together. So we're going to reverse the process although we took it apart. So the first thing I put back in is, I guess I would call it the firing pin safety, I guess it is. So easiest way to do it is put the spring in there, hold the slide this way, up, and we're going to drop it in, or push it in, to that spot. Now the reason we're going to do that is to do it reversed is a pain. It's frankly a little bit of a pain anyway. So you're not really going to be able to see how I'm doing this that well, and I apologize, but I can't see how to do it and show you any better. Alright, so I have it partially in. That's how it, so it can move down right now. So the spring is in and it's in the right spot. Now we're going to hold that in, and then we can put that pin with the little notch in that we took out, the long one, we can put that back into this hole. You can probably see a little better now. We can put that into the hole now, and should just slide right in. And by holding this in, you should be able to get it back where it needs to go. Now it's holding it in. I'm just going to use the pin punch to push it in all the way, and so now it's nice and flush. Okay, so now that's holding, and that can go up and down the way it's designed. Next thing we're going to do is the loaded chamber indicator. So we're going to take that small spring for it and the loaded chamber indicator. Spring goes in the back. That's it right there. And that's, again, this is the end of the barrel here where the cartridges come out. This is the back of it. And we're going to put the loaded chamber indicator in this way. Now that's going to just drop right on and in to that slot. And then what we're going to do, if you can see there's daylight going through there. That's good, that's what we want. And now we're going to drive a pin back through. Now if you remember, I took it out going left to right, so I'm going to put it in right to left. Remember, keep this back and your thumb on top of it, or finger. Otherwise it'll shoot off and you'll lose that little tiny spring, and then you're back to square one and have to go order a new one. So now we can see daylight through there again. I'm going to put the pin through. I'm going to put it through the same way I took it out. Now if you don't want to scratch up your gun again, this is where you put it almost all the way through, but it's not all the way. It's not flush, as you can see. You actually want it recessed on both sides. So I'm going to use my small, this is my 1/16 punch. Alright, now you want that recessed on both sides about even. I have to go just a hair more. It's better not to rush this. You don't want to push it back out the other side. So now it's about even on both sides. And that's back in, and that will now go up and then return back under its own spring pressure. Okay, so again, up. You let go, it'll drop back down. Okay, that's back together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the firing pin and firing pin spring back in. So that large spring is going to go in. There's no right or wrong way that I can see for that spring. The firing pin is going to go into the channel. should slide in pretty easily. Mine for some reason doesn't want to slide in very easily for a second. There we go. I had to rotate it. So what we want to do, gunsmithing is not always easy, right? Every once in a while everything doesn't want to play. So this notch in here, that's in the firing pin, you'll see it starts to close off that hole. So you don't have to really have this in any particular point. Where it normally wants to stay is just fine. Or you can hold it in, it's just fine. You can even rotate it a little bit out, it's just fine. If you rotate it a lot out, you'll see it starts to close that hole off. So I just hold it where it's what it wants to be. And we're going to take our roll pin and we're going to put it in from the top down. Because this is the larger hole out of the group. We're going to get that centered. And then I'm going to take my roll pin punch. This is my larger one, which is 1/8. Turn that over it. And now we got it started. Now what we want to do is we want to get that flush, so it's still up a little bit. Alright, so now it's nice and flushed, maybe just a hair recessed, but not by much. And that's what we want, and that will hold the firing pin in, so it can't go and shoot out across the room. So now the last thing you have left to do is put in the striker indicator and spring. So the metal part goes towards the barrel. That'll slide right in, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You're going to try, there's a hole in the piece of polymer. So what we do is we want to get that hole dead center in that metal striker indicator. Once you do, you want to hold some pressure, okay, because now we have it tensed, the spring that is. And maybe you tensed also if you've never done this before. So we have that in. Slide the cover partially back on. And then while you're holding everything together, you can use one of your pin punches to get it started back on. So you can see it's partially back on. And then all you have to do is slide this all the way. It'll pop and click. Everything is now smooth and back where it was to begin with. Now we can put our barrel back in, our guide rod and spring, and we can put that back on our slide. So while this is still up, it will not go back on if it's not. Slide this back over. Let me show you how again it goes again. Alright, so it'll slide over those rails, front and back. Lock it, flip this lever forward, and now you can drop the slide. You can either pull it back or drop the slide release or slide lock. And now we can test it. So there's the striker indicator, and if you pull a trigger, it goes forward and works. So that's it. We've taken apart the slide and field stripped the rest of the gun and reassembled it, and now you're ready to have fun with it. Thanks again for watching.